Good news! It's the Dacia Sandero. It's about time we had one of these on Hubnut. This is the most affordable car in the UK when it was in production. Currently, as of this very moment I'm making the video, I believe they're the second cheapest car. I think the Kia Picanto has just got a little bit cheaper. But this was the return of Dacia to the UK market. Not Dacia, as it looks, Dacia. Dacia tried to sell the Renault 12 based models here in the early 80s. Even their own PR department could only come up with very acceptable as a way to describe it. They were not very well received. The Dacia Denim was on the market for a very brief period of time. I have bought a Dacia in Romania and driven it here to the UK. So do go and check out those videos. So really, the Dacia Sandero is an excellent example of platform sharing. Volkswagen, the absolute masters of it. What could be a Skoda Octavia could also be an Audi TT. And Renault decided to get in on the action. Renault was then partnered with Nissan, and they did a lot of platform sharing. So the platform this car was used under the Renault Clio. It was used under the Nissan Tiida, and even I think the Leaf used a similar version of the platform, and also the Cube. So it was a very common platform between lots and lots of different cars, and that enabled them to make them cheaply in Romania and other parts of the world as well. This was a truly global car, massively popular in South America as well. But in 2013, Dacia came back to the UK market with this second generation Sandero, and it's been a massive success. They've sold loads and loads of them because they're cheap. And it raises an interesting point. These days, is a cheap car rubbish? They're not like the old cheap cars. FSOs, Ladas, even dare I say it, the rear engine Skodas, all felt like cars of another era when you bought those in the 1980s. When I was a child, a cheap car really was cheap. Now I think this second generation Sandero is a really smart looking thing for a start off. It doesn't look like a cheap car. This one's even got lovely metallic paint. It's really rather smart. Now unfortunately it's so wet today that even I'm getting rained on even in an underground car park. Welcome to Wales. So let's talk a bit about where the Sandero comes from. It all started with the Logan, I think, for Dacia, which was based on the Renault Clio. The first generation Logan we didn't get in the UK. I have driven one in Romania. Really rather nice budget car. And I think Renault realised that a budget brand could be a really useful thing in Western Europe as well. So we saw the rise of Dacia. I think it began with the new Duster. Came to the UK first in 2013. This second generation Sandero followed on very soon afterwards, and it was hugely popular. It really did sell in very strong numbers, and I think that's because it doesn't feel like a cheap product. You can't make a rubbish car in the same way people used to be able to make rubbish cars in the olden days. So the build quality is really rather good, and yes, some of the dashboard plastics are nasty, but and you could get a bit of exposed metal, but is that such a bad thing? I don't think so. This is a Laureate, so it wasn't the cheapest of the cheap. This is like top spec poverty, if you like. But we've got, you know, air conditioning, electric windows, naturally got power steering, and a fair bit of safety gear as well. They did quite well in the safety test because of the Renault heritage. The Renault Megane being one of the first car to get 5 stars on the Euro NCAP. So it's a safe car. The running gear is well proven in ordinary Renault models. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So those Renault mechanicals are on fine display under here. And if I lift the bonnet, which is easily done one-handed because it actually has a telescopic strut, not something you would necessarily expect on a cheap car, we can see this one has the 1.2 litre petrol engine, a very solid engine. But yeah, there's so much space around it. You can actually see stuff. You could also get a 3-cylinder petrol engine, I think that came slightly later, and 1.5 Renault diesels. So moving inside, like I say, the quality's pretty good, I think. There's a little bit of tinniness. The plastics are a bit hard and scratchy if you're prone to scratching, but you know, nice little sill strip with Dacia on it. That's quite nice, and it all looks quite nice. Look, we've got lots of stitching visible on the seat, so it just breaks up the acres of black plastic. And yeah, nice, fairly straightforward. I like the vents as well, they're quite smart. We've even got a little multifunction display unit thing, which I guess is how cars behave these days. There we go, look, Dacia and LG. You can almost see the Dacia, this camera's struggling a little. But yeah, we got the aircon, we've got the electric windows, window lock there. We've got, I don't know if it's cruise control or speed limiting, maybe it's both. 5-speed gearbox here, nice little leather clad gear lever because this is the Laureate spec. And again, we've got a bit of leather around the steering wheel, a few buttons, and then indicators left and wipers to the right, sadly with no mist function. Let's just do a quick wiper test, shall we? Nice spray pattern. I like that spray pattern very much. Covers much of the windscreen, but sadly there is a very small triangle of doom up here. I'm just trying to, yeah, you can see where the passenger wiper arc doesn't quite meet the driver arc. Not as bad as some Renaults, but still far from ideal. But yeah, it must be said, really comfortable driving position. Slight trend of the modern car of the head restraint being a bit too close to the head for me. I think that's to benefit you in the case of a rear end thump. You're a bit better protected, but I always find the headrest is kind of where my head wants to be. But nice big windows and pretty good visibility. We've even got, look, map reading lights, all mod cons. So yeah, it's not bad in here at all. Like I say, I mean, you could take offence to the nasty hard plastic, but similarly, you could just ignore it and get on with your life. And yeah, nice clear display ahead. Pop the lights on for a bit more colour. Orange isn't my favourite, but yeah, looks quite smart. 64,000 miles covered by this example, and to be honest, you would be hard pushed to tell. Moving to the rear, the door opening is very generous indeed and nice and upright, so I can get in with no fear of clonking my head as I do so. Close the door, got a tiny little pocket down there for storage. We've got storage in the backs of the seats as well, ignore my detritus. But with a seat set for me, I would say weirdly, the seat is resting on my shins. I've got knee room, my shins not so much, but good amount of headroom here in the back. Very generous, I'd say. Yeah, it's a nice comfortable seat. We haven't got a centre armrest. This is not luxury motoring, but it does look like we've got a 60-40 split rear seat to extend the luggage space. Handy features too, look, we've got a remote release for the boot, so we can pop open the tailgate and take in a really rather generous space. There's quite a lot of room in here. Look, you can easily get a deck chair in and some coolant and antifreeze should you feel the need. Under here, let's see what we got. Oh, it's the old can of inflating foam and tyre inflator rather than a spare wheel. But I believe you could order a spare wheel if you wanted one. But yeah, that's not bad. Bit of a high lip, but this is a hatchback, not an estate. Again, lots of exposed metalwork, keeping the costs down. Okay, having swapped the horror of the Tesco car park for the Vale of Rydal Railway car park, for the owner is on the steam trains today, let's see what this is actually like. Yeah, pretty smooth. Sounds like a modern sort of multi-valve 4-cylinder engine. Pop some lights on, give ourselves some wiperage, and away we go. Doors lock in that annoying way that modern cars tend to. Clutch bite seems a little high on this example. I'm still getting used to it. Bye Bella. But initial impressions certainly are it's just nicely smooth and very torquey, so you don't have to raise the revs. Nice snickety gear change, you don't need any effort on that at all. That's pretty pleasant. And like I say, it's just a proof that modern cheap cars aren't in any way like old cheap cars. Superb mirrors, the mirrors are a really good size. Electrically operated on this Laureate as well. Now I have to say, when he said it was the 1.2, I was initially a bit disappointed because obviously I would prefer a 3-cylinder engine at almost any given opportunity. But yeah, initial thoughts are this engine's really quite nice and smooth. Fair bit of road noise, but then that might be because all other noise is fairly reduced. But I imagine they didn't go to town with sound deadening because this is a cheap car. It feels a bit strange saying that because it doesn't feel it. I think we should take it up one of my favourite roads in the world, the A4 120 up the Devil's Bridge. seeing as the owner's going that way on the steam train anyway. Brakes respond very well. In fact, I'm still getting a bit used to the brakes. They are quite fearsome and a little difficult to moderate for smoothness, but I think that's probably just me getting used to it. Indicators very electronic and fake. Not unusual for a modern car. We'll just jump into the drive just to cover the controls in a bit more detail. This is indeed cruise control or speed limiter, depending on which you prefer. If I click in the cruise, then you can set your miles an hour with this one over here. Obviously it won't work at the moment because we're stationary, so up and down, and cancel and resume, and it seems to work very well. I also missed this little snippet. There we go. We've got the typical Renault radio control, but look, because this is the Laureate, we've also got Bluetooth phone controls in there, I guess. That's quite good. And also electric mirror switch there and a couple of blanking plugs. Possibly the most bizarre place I've ever seen for a switch. Right down by your right shin is a button to adjust the headlamp light level. How bizarre. Back to the driving action. So the first test is going to be this 16% gradient up ahead of us. I'm in 4th gear doing 30 miles an hour at just below 2000 RPM. Let's see how it gets on. Yeah, I was going to need 3rd. It's going to need 2nd. So it's a bit modern multi-valve engine. It's, yeah, if you actually want actual grunt, it's all at the top end. So what I thought was initially encouraging torque characteristics is, I think, just the benefit of really good fuel mapping. It makes these engines behave very well at lower revs, but when you actually need to get a shift on, yeah, more grunt definitely needed. Past our local Dacia dealer, where I've seen a 2016 one of these for sale at £4,300, so that's still pretty cheap motoring. Yeah, my foot absolutely nailed to the carpet at this point. There we go, there we go. Oh yeah, from about 3,500 revs. Adds up to 5,000 revs and 60 miles an hour. So yeah, this is not fast motoring. But nonetheless, we're now doing 60 miles an hour. It's just below 3,000 revs, so it's not the greatest for touring. Can't do any motorway testing, for there are no motorways in this part of Wales, nor even any dual carriageways. So 60 miles an hour is as fast as we can go. As we come to some bends, punt it in, yeah, it just goes round as much as you'd expect. The ride is good as well, as you kind of expect for something developed on a French car platform. Yeah, the ride's really good. The steering feels pretty typically numb, but is geared nicely. Yeah, it's nothing to write home about. It's not extraordinary, but it's easily very, very competent. I think the sort of people who are buying a Dacia aren't buying it for road-burning performance, although I believe in Brazil you could briefly get one with a 2-litre engine for a bit more get up and go. Like I say, Renault were very clever with Dacia, and they really did tailor it to each market. Very slightly different styling on the South American ones, and they had a facelift in about 2019, I think. Whereas here in the UK, we're now on the 3rd generation of Sandero, and Stepway, the little SUV type one that's just basically got higher ground clearance and a bit of sort of black cladding on it. People seem to really like those. But around here, that extra ground clearance can be useful, but even on these basic models, the ground clearance seems pretty good. So these cars built in Pitești in Romania, although Dacias, like I say, are now built all over the world, and one of the ways they keep prices low is by building them wherever labour is cheap. But yeah, a lot to recommend this. In terms of its rival, the Dacia Sandero was competing against cars like the Hyundai i10, the Kia Picanto, which both feel quite a bit smaller, I think, and I guess against the Renault Clio, which is about the same size. It's 4 meters in length, which technically makes it a super mini by modern standards, I think. It's strange, I kind of feel as this as a bigger car, but in terms of raw dimensions, it's not actually much bigger than a Clio. Now, it's probably the size of how big Clios have got. Yeah, just I drifted out of the torque zone now, so drop a couple of gears to get back up this hill. You do have to work it hard if you want to make any sort of progress. I'm told if you're relatively gentle with it, it's quite good on fuel. Incidentally, the current Sandero, this is very telling, isn't it? No diesel option anymore, only petrol. Right, coming down to one of the trickier bends on this road. It's off camber with a bump. It really does highlight any flaws in a car's suspension. Doing about 55 miles an hour as we pitch it in. Oh yeah, not a problem at all. Some cars really get thrown by that bend. But yeah, first Sandero I've ever driven, and not disappointed. These are definitely the Hubnut cars of the future. But mostly I'm finding this car is utterly unremarkable, and that's probably its greatest strength. And the controls feel really nice as well, actually. Really nice feel to them. I have a fault though. I have managed to find a fault with this car. There is nowhere for my clutch foot to go. The center console is really chunky. So the only place for my foot to go is underneath the pedal. That's not great, especially if you're on a road like this where you're on the pedals a fair bit. Otherwise, lack of torque aside, I cannot find much to grumble about at all. Well done, Dacia. So there we go, we have reached Devil's Bridge in just 20 minutes. It'll take the train a bit longer to get up here, but I need to go and return this back down to Aberystwyth. But always a joy to come for a drive in these parts. But yeah, that's very pleasant budget motoring. How times have changed. The really very, very acceptable Dacia Sandero. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can head to the Hubnut store if you wish to support what we do. Details in the description below. Otherwise, we'll see you in a future video. Farewell. What's that? You'd like a rear wiper test? We can do that. Oh, there we go. There's even got some washer. That's a pretty decent wiping performance in anyone's book, I think.